Hello everybody, my name is Peter. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'll do a proper introduction in a few minutes, but we're going to leave 2 or 3 minutes for people to log in. Whilst they do, I'm afraid there's a bit of a tradition for ELN hosted events, which is whilst we wait for people to log in, I inflict upon you some very bad jokes. It's okay to groan, laughing is entirely optional, and to be frank, I'd be a little bit surprised if you did. Today I thought I would choose a theme of data science, which reflects my background. I'm a data scientist at heart. So some of these you may have heard before. As I say, I'm not guaranteeing they're good. They may well be old, but I like them. So here's the first joke for this afternoon. Data science is 80% preparing data and 20% complaining about preparing data. And those data scientists amongst us will know that is exactly true as well. And as a data scientist, I can tell you that data is like people. If you interrogate it hard enough, it will tell you whatever you want to hear. Now, talking about data, and for the science fiction fans amongst us, what's the difference between Facebook and Jean-Luc Picard? Captain Picard would never sell data. And that one really is a groan. And I do a lot of work in artificial intelligence as well, and I like this one. Artificial intelligence is no match for natural stupidity. Now, I was visiting my hometown, Andover, a little while ago, and as I drove past the data recovery centre that's just outside the town where I used to work at, it brought back a lot of memories. Oh, that really one is a groan. So what's the difference between an introverted data architect and an extroverted one? Answer: the extrovert will stare at your shoes. And finally, and you'll need to think about this one, there are 2 kinds of data scientists: those who can extrapolate from incomplete data, and that really will take a moment or two to get started. So, my name is Peter. As I said, I'm just going to stop this for a moment. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event. Now, I'm the founder of Exemplify Consulting, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. So I'd like to welcome you to this webinar put on by Executive Leaders Network, but in partnership with Coupa, Xoomworks, and Newsquest. So we've got 3 great speakers lined up for you, and I'll just like to introduce those very briefly. So me on the right, you can ignore me. Jason will be our 3rd speaker to join us, but in a moment I'm going to hand over to Anne Jenkins from Xoomworks, and she'll be followed very closely by Hakanda Ann from Coupa. Now, I'm at this point going to hand over to Anne and ask her to introduce herself and Xoomworks and set the scene for us.
Thank you, Peter. Well, welcome to the webinar. My name is Anne Jenkins. If you've heard Peter's jokes, you'll be very glad that I'm not going to be telling any, so that's good news. I'm the account manager for Xoomworks, and I'd like to give you a very brief introduction to our company. Xoomworks is a leading procurement consultancy firm that helps mid-sized and global organisations around the world to improve their procurement functions. We have over 200 clients and have been operating for 20 years, delivering effective procurement transformation for organisations in UK, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. We have 250 employees and a team of about 80 sourcing and procurement experts and over 200 clients. Our services are split into 3 main areas: sourcing and transformation, providing experts with strategic and practical knowledge to advise clients across a whole procurement spectrum and to deliver change. For us, the key is to build trust with clients so that we do change with you as part of your team rather than to you. Secondly, procurement technology implementation and optimization services. We know that not everything requires a technology solution. However, when it does, we like to work with the leading system procurement providers. As such, we are proud to work closely with Coupa. We've completed implementations for over 65 Coupa clients, Newsquest being one, and in over 65 countries. In addition, we offer operational procurement support from our Centre of Excellence in Cluj and also Bulgaria. Here we have a multilingual team providing a range of support services to help free up your staff to focus on more strategic tasks. Services include spend analysis, supplier enablement, training, release management upgrade support, e-auction assistance, and service desk support. So hopefully that has given you a high-level overview of Xoomworks, here to help organisations in their journeys towards procurement excellence. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Anne. And for our next speaker, I'm going to ask Hakan from Coupa to introduce himself and Coupa. So Hakan, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Hakan Duran from Coupa, and I'm part of the mid-market organization in EMEA, based out of London. I've been with Coupa for about 5 years now, over 5 years actually. By the way, before I start, loved the jokes, Peter, so that was really good. And I'm an account director, as I said, and would love to talk to you a little bit about Coupa. So, as I said, I joined 5 years ago, and we're about 300 employees back then. Currently, we have across the globe 1,800 employees, and we've grown rapidly throughout the past 6, 7, 8 years, and that's down to our number one core value, which is ensuring customer success. Now, we're a business spend management technology company, and what we mean by ensuring customer success and how the way we define it is through what we call success metrics or KPIs, 4 of which you have currently in front of you. So just to give you 2 examples, I mean, we're talking about procurement, digitization of procurement here today. So pre-approved spend, and by the way, these 4 KPIs are all averages of our top quartile of the top achieving customers within the Coupa community. So pre-approved spend of 98%. Imagine you have £100 million of spend, 98 million of that. The best achievers in Coupa achieve on average, 98 million pounds of that being pre-approved. So you have complete visibility and control of your spend, as well as 81% of on-contract spend, which basically means, translated, that you guide the end users to buy from the right supplier, the right item at the right price, and hence getting the best deals for your spend. In terms of the Coupa suite, we have a very comprehensive suite of our platform, and it all started with the end user in mind. So all of the Coupa modules are designed to be user-centric, which is the U in Coupa. And so the transactional core consists of procurement, invoicing, and expense management, as well as Coupa Pay, which has been added to the transactional core 2 years ago, developed organically, that enables our customers to pay their suppliers through virtual credit cards on PO, through the partnership with Barclaycard and Amex, and also through digital payment means. So once our customers get spend under management and control and visibility into their spending through the transactional core, they then can get more value out of the spend through getting better sourcing events in place, or managing their third-party risk with supplier and risk management, or inventory management, making sure that everything from a stock perspective is up to date as well. We operate globally, as I said, in 100+ countries, and having $2 trillion of spend going through Coupa at the moment from a Coupa community perspective enables us to ensure that our customers can benchmark themselves as well, and make sure that they can, from a KPIs and success metrics perspective, the ones I've just mentioned, that they are always striving for excellence and striving to get better from a KPIs perspective. And last but not least, analyst companies rate us really highly. Spend Matters, Gartner, IDC, Forrester, all of them. We've been ranked as the leader in the industry, and again, that comes down to the customer feedback and ensuring our number one core value of ensuring customer success. The latest one that's hot off the press is Gartner Magic Quadrant that was published last week. You feel free to download that at coupa.com. view the full report and get the analysis of Gartner. That's it from my end. Thanks for the time, and Peter, back to you.
Thank you, Hakan. You'll be joining us again in a moment, I know. So before we go on to an interview with our third speaker, what I'd like to do is introduce a very short poll. So this is the question we're going to ask. What are some of your current procurement challenges that your company is experiencing? And these are the answers. So I'm going to set the poll to live in a moment. As I say, I'd like you to look for the answer that best suits your situation and select that one. And then we'll discuss very briefly some of the results. So the poll's going live now. And as I say, I'm going to give you a few minutes just to enter some answers, and then we'll talk about those in a moment. So the answers are financial non-compliance, a lack of ineffective financial processes, lack of visibility, control over spend, lack of digitization, or risk management. So if you'd like to take a moment, just hit your entries. I can see they're starting to come in now. And we'll give that another few seconds. Great. So it's quite an interesting mixed bag here. It's still settling. It looks like lack of visibility is one of the forerunners, as well as some of the inefficient financial processes that were going on. I would have expected, lack of digitization. Didn't see that one sneaking up on the outside there. That's interesting, actually, because I think over the last 6 months, we've all had a bit of a dash to digital as we've transformed our business. So it's going to continue to be an issue for all of us, I'm sure. But what I'm also seeing from other organizations is that it is actually going quite well for many, and doubling down on digitization and the way in which technology can help them. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to introduce our third speaker for an interview. Now, whilst I do that, I'm going to stop the slide. So you'll see us all come back into group view in a moment. And I'm going to ask my other guests to put their cameras on. Great. Thank you very much. That was quite interesting, I thought, Hakan. That the lack of digitization was up there along the top of the results, along with things like lack of visibility. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experiences of what you've seen in the market. What are your clients saying they're experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. And as I said, I've been with Coupa for about 5 years, met with hundreds of prospective customers and customers. And it's no surprise that still lack of digitization is a big pain of the UK or kind of organizations across the globe, not just in the UK as well. And when we first speak with our prospective customers and meet with them face to face, I hope those days will come back where we sit in front of each other again. We surely ask certain metrics in terms of, what is your addressable spend? How much are you spending per annum? For example, it is very majority of our customers and prospective customers are actually finding it very difficult to answer that on the spot. So, and that's down to, they don't have the visibility into their spend first and foremost, but that's usually the result of lack of digitization. And the fact that spend happens everywhere within the business, so out and about, or even for customers that have one single system in place, you could see that end users still utilize different means to spend money, right? So and you still have that lack of visibility, and as I said, I mean it's a very frequent pain point. What we've seen in the last 9 months as well, through I guess also a little bit of the impact of the unprecedented times that we're in, is that the supply chain risk has been coming up as a big pain point, which is currently here at 6%, but we see that coming up more and more. So maybe next time next year, if we do this poll again, it would probably reach to levels of 15-20% as well. And that's down to the fact that supply chains are crumbling with the pressure that some of the suppliers are in at the moment. And organizations are looking to either to reevaluate their supply chains or to work with safer options from a supplier pays perspective. So no, absolutely. And I think this is a very, very good reflection of the current situation and the current pain points that the companies here in the UK, but also across the globe, are facing.
Yeah, thank you, Hugo. And I think we probably will need to talk about supply chain a little later as well. Certainly, disruption of supply chain has been a major aspect of what's happened over the last few months, as has the role of procurement in helping to free up capital, but also the wider duty of actually working with our suppliers to ensure that they survive through this crisis. So procure to pay, I think, has probably never been as important as it has been over the last 6 months. So with that, what I'd like to do now is ask our special guest, Jason, to firstly briefly introduce himself, and then he and I are going to have a conversation about some of the things that we've been seeing. So Jason, if you wouldn't mind, take a few seconds and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so my name's Jason Boldaro. I'm Group Purchasing Manager at Newsquest Media Group. So we're a publishing business, digital and local newspaper publishing businesses with currently around 140 titles around the UK. We're making a digital transformation, moving those regional readers into the digital world. I've been with Newsquest for about 2.5 years, just about 2.5 years now. And one of the first things that I did when I arrived at Newsquest was evaluate the market for a purchase to pay system, run a tender and select Xoomworks and Coupa as the organisation's new system. I come from a broad procurement background as well, where I have always managed all areas of spend within whatever business I've been in. So I class myself as a procurement all-rounder, few specialisms, but a generalist, as it were.
Great, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I think we've all had to wear multiple hats recently. I was talking to somebody just a couple of days ago, and I think they had 4 job titles accumulate over the last few months. So what I'm firstly going to do is I'm going to ask our audience, if you would like to ask a question, we're going to have a formal Q&A after this interview, but please put it into the chat and I'll be happy to pick that up as we go through. But Jason, here's my first question. What were the key drivers for investing in a spend management system? What compelled you to look at that?
Okay, so first of all, from my own perspective, when I arrived into the business, I needed to see better category management across the organisation. We needed to also drive some efficiencies around invoice processing and also expense management, because we've implemented that part of the Coupa product range or product suite as well. Really importantly, we needed to replace or at least update an existing legacy system, and so we did an evaluation of the market in order to get to that point. It's fair to say that we needed to improve some of our purchase controls as well, and again, going back to sort of the category management area as well, from my own perspective, I needed to improve our overall supplier management, and so a decent purchase to pay system gives me some of the tools with which to do that.
Great, thank you. Now, clearly people joining us this afternoon are also thinking about purchase to pay systems and looking back over how the selection process played out. Is there anything you would do differently next time?
I'm not sure if we would do things too differently, but what I would say is that in order to get where we are now, we ran a fairly exhaustive product selection, and that was prior to going to official tender for the business. I'd say probably we would broaden the scope a little to include alternative payment methods, because that's something that we've since wanted to try, but have, given the current spend controls in most businesses, we found it difficult to get a business case across the line for that, because there's some extra license cost involved, of course, when you do that sort of thing. And also probably allow suppliers to advertise within the tender more of the added value that they can bring to the table. So it was a fairly restricted sort of selection process, and also look at more in depth at the supplier's need for third-party integration solutions, because that's something that I think we could have done better if we'd been guided a little bit more by the likes of Xoomworks.
Great, thank you. So, and I'm actually going to take a question from our audience, which has been put forward, because it relates to something I was probably going to ask anyway. So I was going to ask, how did you reach your decision about which platform best suited your needs? But the audience question is, why Xoomworks and Coupa? So I think there's a question there, both the question and the answer all in one thing. So what was the value add? Why did you reach that decision about Xoomworks and Coupa?
Well, our situation with Coupa is slightly different in that we evaluated a full range of competitive products, but we already have a parent company, Gannett, in the US, which many people will know as USA Today and various other news brands. They use Coupa purely for purchasing. They don't process invoices there. So they already, in the background, they had a deal that we could utilize with Coupa, quite a good deal, which when placing that deal in amongst the tender process, the value for money element was really hard to ignore. In terms of looking at Xoomworks, we ran, in addition to the product selection and pricing of competitive products, we also, when we narrowed down the selection of those products, we also ran as kind of a more competitive process between two implementation partners. And Xoomworks, their presentation, their skill set, and the references as well that they were able to provide. So Xoomworks had done implementations for other media businesses with Coupa, and we were able to sit down and talk to those people, competitors of ours as well, to be honest. So it was quite interesting to see how they've managed to get around it and implement it, and so that was a really, that was one of many things that got Xoomworks across the line with us.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's not plagiarism if you go to multiple sources, then it's called research. So I think that when you're looking at these, there's no harm in looking at what other players in your sector do. Clearly, there's lessons to be learned from everywhere at the moment. So now the next question, I think, we'll take a bit of thought. So I'd also like you to think about your method on this. So it's about the KPIs. So, we all have to measure outcomes, right? Why did we do it? So what were the main key performance indicators and metrics that you used to determine the success of your transformation? And if you wouldn't mind, and if you could share with us a little bit about your methodology behind that. I'm always interested in the methodology behind the number.
Okay, so one of the main KPIs for us is around purchase order compliance, to ensure. So with the best will in the world, you can't, there are some categories within any business which will make implementation of a purchase order quite difficult. In our particular area of business, that's around distribution. It's a moving feast, our distribution spend month by month, and it's very difficult to create a purchase order in advance that will match what actually happens on the day, because people are making very quick commercial decisions about especially at the moment when you can imagine circulation is quite difficult for newspapers. So we may have to chop and change what happens with distribution at the last minute. Having said that, yeah, purchase order compliance, using the insights tools, looking at within Coupa, looking at some of the prescriptions that it provides, really useful. Invoice efficiency is also a key indicator for us. So how many of our suppliers we can get to use sort of the Nirvana route for invoice processing, which would be using the supplier portal or sending via a CXML invoice integration, and then moving down through the not quite as great as those two would be, just getting a decent quality PDF, digital PDF that Coupa can understand. Expense efficiency was quite important at the time, not so important right now because people aren't really accruing a lot of expenses. But that was getting more visibility of our expenses as well. Like many businesses, we had a few different systems working around in different regions, mostly around spreadsheets and very archaic ways of doing expenses. Now we have a really efficient digital app that works on your phone. You can expense straight away, and of course finally is savings delivered. And again, we use the insights and the reporting within Coupa to try and drill down into where we're making decent contract savings.
Thank you, Jason. You actually touched upon two of the points in the poll there, which was including the visibility, getting insights into what's going on. I guess there's a lot to come out from meaning with that as well. So let me ask you then a leading kind of question. What were the biggest challenges with your procurement transformation journey? I've never heard of anybody who's done a transformation and it all went swimmingly straight out of the box. So what were some of your challenges? Okay, so one of the challenges I referred to it a little bit earlier on was around some of the getting some of the integrations right. There are better ways to do it than we did, and within the it caused a lot of hair pulling within the project to get some of the elements working correctly, and that's because we use a third-party invoice scanning product, which was a little tricky to say the least. Relying on Coupa itself to do all of that would have been the best approach, but because we had some restrictions in terms of our licensing on Coupa, we decided to go a different route. The purchase order compliance, as I mentioned before, it's a continuing challenge. Occasionally, you need to be a little bit tough on different areas of the business and just try and ensure that, I mentioned distribution being a difficult area to do, to create purchase orders, but there are areas of the business where people think it's difficult, but actually it's not. And they just need to be shown that it's, in terms of creating things like blanket purchase orders, which can stick the background and then allow invoices to be processed against them. Purchase orders that don't necessarily have to be sent to a supplier, that are sitting there again for processing purposes only, and approval processes, of course. And supplier onboarding, that's always a continuing challenge. We greatly underestimated it, and we should have listened more to Xoomworks about how important that was during the implementation part of the project. Getting as many suppliers as you can to use your supplier portal is really a really good idea. Doing a few more CXML integrations, getting our stakeholders to buy into how important that was underestimated during the project. So we only managed to do one punch out integration during the project. I've now done 7 on top of that. So it's not, I hate using it, it's not rocket science, but once you've done it a couple of times and once you've been shown by Xoomworks how to do it,
it isn't that difficult, but you do have to find the right kind of supplier. You know, not every supplier, they might have a website, a web ordering platform, but they will have no idea how to do a CXML integration. So you have to pick your suppliers to do it. So that's probably few. I don't want to sort of dwell too much on challenges, because actually, you know, it was an enjoyable project to work on. The challenges didn't change that too much.
Great, thank you, Jason. I started my career as a rocket scientist, actually, and I can tell you that rocket science isn't rocket science either. It's mostly engineering, but with a little bit of math bolted onto the side.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that always comes up when you're looking at a transformation program, which is so integral to the business, is how do you get alignment with all the internal stakeholders like finance and IT? So who did you have to engage with, and how did you engage them and get them on board this transformation journey? And again, I would ask if you've got any tips you'd care to share. I'm sure we'd all like to hear them.
Well, I suppose basic project management tells you that you need to identify your stakeholders at the very start of any project. So, you know, we went out to the business. We knew instinctively who many of those stakeholders were, but then we went a little bit further, and we tried to draw in people from various areas of the business. So from our editorial departments as well. Very useful, in fact, when we were doing at the tail end of the project, when we were doing the user acceptance testing, that we needed to have brought those stakeholders with us, so it wasn't like a massive surprise when they suddenly got sent a UAT script to run through. But we were already in a good position with a lot of our alignment. So our IT and finance teams, we have a finance systems team as well as an IT team, systems team. And we'd already migrated to a single chart of accounts, for example, which made life very simple. So we are a business, I probably should have mentioned this before, we're a business that's grown through acquisition like many others. So we have lots of regions which at one time still had their own chart of accounts, and it could have been quite difficult. We'd also migrated to what was at the time the latest version of Dynamics. So our ERP system was in a good state as well, ready for this. And also, sorry, we'd also got our single sign-on system ready to go. And we actually, this project helped our IT department because they'd been waiting to implement a new Okta single sign-on platform, and this kind of that enabled them to push that forward a little bit earlier on their roadmap.
Great, thank you, Jason. Now we've got a few questions coming in on the chat. I'm going to save a couple of them for a Q&A that's going to follow this, but I have got one question I'd like to put to you because it immediately follows this one. So this is a question: how long did it take to do the procurement, and then how long to do the implementation? So would you mind sharing what you can about that? How long did it take to complete the procurement, and how long to do the implementation?
So the procurement exercise took between 2.5 to 3 months. So through products investigation and so on, through to running the tender and then awarding. Then the implementation, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Anne, I think it was 2 months. It could have been, I think it was 2.5 months.
Yeah, it would be about 2 to 3 months. I think you're exactly wrong.
We were quite tight on the deadlines. We like many businesses, we have our own internal deadlines for various things, and we wanted it to be implemented before during a summer period where it was not conflicting with any of our other finance deadlines or anything like that. So yeah, we were quite tough on that timing, and also tough on budget, because projects overrun, we've been paying Xoomworks more money.
Okay. Well, I guess that there are another side to that discussion we could have, but yeah, thank you for that. So, by the way, if you notice me looking down, it's because I'm furiously taking notes. So I think there's some really interesting points coming out of this conversation.
I'm looking to the right because I'm looking at my notes. On my
So then, I know you talked about this very briefly, but what recommendations would you make for those who are preparing to embark on their procurement transformation and the technology implementation? So they're about to start off. You've shared with us already a couple of ideas, but are there anything else you'd like to give us as a tip as you enter this process?
Well, like I said, having a chart of accounts in good shape is really important, because we also had an added element of constraint in that, because we were running one Coupa platform, both in the US for Gannett, our parent company, and in the UK, we really didn't want to have any more mess of other charts of accounts, because we already had effectively 2 charts of accounts running, and we were able to separate things very nicely within Coupa because of that. But you can imagine it would have been quite distracting within the project to have to deal with that. Having the previous year got our ERP up to date was great, and I would really it's so important to have that in place, because you don't want to have to be dealing with another system upgrade halfway through the project, for example. Then the most efficient way to connect your ERP and Coupa. So there are really good connections, and then there are not quite so good. We probably could have done a little better on that ourselves, and we should have listened a little bit more to our implementation partners about that. So I would I would always explore that area, make sure that you know exactly what the right thing is for you, and don't, as we did, we tried to hang on to something that we already used. And so don't do that. And also the last thing is to make sure that your supplier database is as up to date as possible. So you have to go through, moving it to any P2P system, you need to go through a rather cathartic culling of your supplier database. We cut a line in the sand at about 18 months to 2 years prior to implementation date, and then we took those suppliers. We hadn't had an invoice from them within that, after that, before that period, if you like. Then we decided not to migrate those across into Coupa. Of course, they were still sitting dormant within Dynamics, but they were not migrated. So having a good supplier database would be also key.
Great, thank you. Now, obviously, you set off with some objectives in mind. There were goals you needed to achieve, and as you said, you were keeping a tight eye on the implementation and the budget. But were there any hidden benefits of managing your spend all in one solution that you hadn't originally considered? So these came as pleasant surprises, perhaps. So perhaps some additional or unconsidered benefits.
Yeah. So the first one, and this is something that we still haven't quite implemented, but we're working on it at the moment. Coupa has got its own inventory management tool sitting within the platform. It would be really beneficial if I'd started working on that prior to COVID-19, because I started to buy a lot of PPE and stuff like that lots of businesses are doing, but we were buying it, and we were buying it from some wholesaler type locations. So funnily enough, we managed to get face masks direct from China, but we did, and that's where most of them are made. And we needed to bring those into a central location, and then of course you can inventory manage them out into your offices out in the field. So that would have been great if I sort of had more time to do that, and I'm doing it now. So that's a good thing. And again, it works. IT hardware, we started buying a lot more laptops during the summer, and we needed to farm those out to home locations. The other thing is the Coupa Insights and the prescriptions that it provides. That's something that we, during an implementation project, you don't really sort of look at what it's going to prescribe you later on, but actually we still have less frequent Coupa meetings because the system is now firmly embedded, but we now our meetings are more around the insights and the prescriptions and what we can do to, especially around supplier onboarding, and how many suppliers you can actually see in Coupa already work with Coupa better than we are working with them, if you see what I mean. So yeah, you can target suppliers and start, you know they already speak the Coupa language, as it were.
Thank you, Jason. And then my last question before I'm going to open the floor up, and we've had lots of questions in chat, so I'm going to do my best to get through them. So you had the expected results, you've had a few unexpected results, you've had a couple of challenges along the way, but I want you to think back, and on reflection, what would you say was the biggest achievement that you got, or perhaps the strongest result? So what do you really look back on and say, that's a cause for celebration?
Well, I think our purchase order compliance is improving all the time, and the business is really adopted purchase orders as the right way to do things, rather than unbacked invoices. So as I mentioned before, we do have suppliers who send in unbacked invoices, but also we have more of our contributors. So these are the people who actually write content for our newspapers and websites, and some of them are not the most technologically savvy people, unfortunately, but we do have more and more of those people adopting the supplier portal, and we've also managed to provide decent ways in which they can interact with Coupa. If they can't use the CSP, we provide them with a decent invoice template that they can use, which then they can send back to us, and it works better with Coupa. The other thing, on a sort of a personal basis, I feel a sense of achievement that I managed to do those 7 punch outs, which was quite, and finding suppliers who will work with you on a punch out, that's an achievement every time, because they're kind of, they are few and far between. And especially at the moment when a lot of businesses have furloughed those kind of staff, some of their applications people, they've got the bare bones to run their platforms, but they don't have the people who maybe would work with somebody like me to do that. So yeah, having 8 punch outs up and running now, it is great, because that not only gives us perfect purchase order compliance in 50% of those suppliers, they're also doing CXML invoicing, which, as you know, is nirvana, as it were. That's seamless end-to-end purchase to pay, and we've targeted those suppliers who generate a lot of invoices for us.
Great, thank you very much, Jason. So we're going to have a quick Q&A now. So here's an introductory slide for the Q&A. But what I actually would like to do is I'm going to go to the chat. I've had, as I said, lots of questions coming through the chat. I'm going to try and answer them in the chronological order that they appeared. And I'm also going to invite Anne and Hakan to perhaps play a slightly larger role in this section. So for the next 15 minutes or so, we'll try and deal with these questions. So question number 1 from Carolyn, and I guess this is to Jason, and if you can answer, if not, just say so. What percentage of the Newsquest spend is through the pre-approved catalogue route, and is this hitting the target that you set out to achieve? So what percentage of your spend is through the pre-approved catalogue, and is that roughly on target?
So in terms of pre-approved catalogues, we haven't done many implementations of catalogues. I've done a few, so the percentage is very low. I can tell you that. What's better is actually the percentage of spend that goes through things like the punch outs, because then you don't need to manage a catalogue, and managing a catalogue takes time. I'm a one-man show in terms of purchasing, so I don't have time to manage catalogues. I do have 1 or 2 suppliers who manage their own catalogues within Coupa, which is by far the best route, and I approve those. Again, those are suppliers, actually new suppliers that I brought on for PPE and hygiene products for COVID-19 compliance in offices. So where we've needed to get hand sanitizer, and our current supplier, like many, struggled to provide that. So yeah, one of the suppliers manages their own catalogue like that. But yeah, it's you know, I'd love to do more, but haven't done that many catalogues.
Thank you. I'm going to put the same question a slightly different way to you, because you obviously deal with a lot of organisations that use these kinds of systems. I think you said in your slides that best in class achieve about 98% of their purchasing through pre-approved catalogues, but I would imagine that on average it's a little lower than that. So what would you say is you look at as, you know, a pretty good standard for percentage of spend through the pre-approved catalogue, and what can they do to improve that? So Hakan, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So the 98% of pre-approved spend doesn't necessarily mean it has to go through a catalog. There's several different ways of getting spend pre-approved. One of the ways I think that is used very frequently in Coupa, especially for services-related spend, is what we call web forms. So you can build, it's highly configurable web forms you can build within a couple of minutes in Coupa, and it captures all the necessary information that you need to, to purchase a service, and that's not part of the catalog. And I believe, Jason, I guess you're using web forms as well to capture services spend, right? So again, good level of, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry,
I can elaborate on that actually, because yes, you prompted a memory, if you like. You know, there is an area of our business where I've created a web form. So we have a leaflet subdivision where we sell leaflet advertising type products, and I've created web forms that allow them to issue standard requisitions out to purchase orders out to their suppliers for that printed leaflet contracts. So we've got the contracts in the background, we've got predefined suppliers, and those suppliers are all working. They are happy to work with the form as it arrives with the purchase order, as it were, and yeah, so that makes life very simple for the staff involved in that purchasing process. Took a little bit backwards and forwards. It was, you know, a few weeks working with that team to make sure the form was exactly right, and yeah, now it works really well.
Peter, can I just jump in there? Yeah, I think it's really key early on to have a look at an analysis of your whole supplier information. So we would push our clients to do that analysis, to tier their suppliers, to look at what areas are suitable for catalogues, what areas are more aligned to web forms, where you should be doing an onboarding program, looking at the CSP side, where you should be focusing in on punch outs. And I have to say, yeah, I give Jason a pat on the back for his 7 punch outs. As he says, it isn't rocket science, but there is a process involved, and it can take quite a long period of time to do. But I would encourage people to do that. Also on the CXML side, you know, you've tiered those into your real high volume transaction suppliers, and you know, if you get 5 to 10 of those on board, that's going to really make some great efficiencies for any organization. So all these steps on that supplier process are going to really improve efficiencies for anyone. So yeah, that's something that I would suggest you do really early on, and I think this is key. Sometimes when people say to us, oh, we do suggest to people, you know, you really need to focus in on the supplier onboarding and your suppliers, but sometimes obviously, you know, it doesn't always happen, but at some point it does have to happen for you to really get what you need to get out of Coupa, and you optimize what Coupa's got in the system, and the suppliers are key for that.
Yeah, some of the just in terms of catalogues during the implementation, we picked a couple of simple ones and they're really useful ones to do in any implementation. We do business cards because they're a nice, simple thing to do, and it kind of teaches you as the person managing Coupa moving forward, how to do a catalogue. I also did. I continue to do, believe it or not, quite a lot of office fit outs, even at this time. And so our office furniture catalogue is really important because I wanted to be prescriptive about what all offices are allowed to buy. I also wanted to make sure that they buy it from the right place and at the contract prices that I'd negotiated. So that's another area. Simple things.
Yeah.
A catalogue for things you can buy with a nice picture attached to it that people can see and get excited. People don't get excited about office furniture, but
but no, it's a good point. It's all about the end user experience, isn't it? And if it's the right experience, they come to use the system, they find what they want. Yes, if there's a picture and it does improve the experience, then I'm all for it. But yeah, it's driving that spend through that system. That's what we want to do. It's important.
I listen to my stakeholders continually, and they come to me and say, Jason, could you create a catalogue? And I've done that for our print centres where we print newspapers. So suppliers now have catalogues, and that works very nicely as well. But it's unfortunately for us, it's still quite a small percentage.
Well, I'm sure I'll get there. And there was a piece of research I was involved in very recently that said something interesting about web forms. They actually scored quite well for recognising customers' emotions and feelings, which you wouldn't expect from a web form. But then I guess if you do human-centric design, you can make anything feel good. There's a question from Debbie, and I don't know how much of this you can ask. She asks, what elements have you implemented? So Jason, this is a question for you. What elements have you actually implemented?
Okay. Expense management. Okay, that was a quick win because it's one of the simpler bits to implement. The core of our project was spent actually implementing invoice processing, purchase orders, catalogues. I think that's kind of the main areas. We haven't. One of the things that we continue to explore is Coupa Pay, which could work well for us, but it's not part of our current plan. So if Hakan can get me a really good deal on that, that'd be great.
You heard it here first, folks.
No pressure. Yeah.
So Hakan, the pressure will be on you.
Happy
I've got an eye on the time because I think we're going to run out, but I'm going to carry on. So Monica has asked, and I think, Jason, if you wouldn't mind trying this first, and then I'd love to get the insights from Hakan and Anne as well. Monica says, thanks for mentioning the CSP. We have challenging suppliers as well. What would be your top 3 tips or recommendations to get the supplier to use the CSP? So I know you can all answer this, but I'm going to go back to Jason first. Your top 3 recommendations on how to get suppliers using the CSP.
Okay, so my first tip is don't look at all suppliers in the same way, because I mentioned our contributors who are a tricky bunch, lovely people, but I still spend quite a lot of intensive time on those on that particular group. I've created a YouTube video specifically for our contributors, which they can access, and it walks them through from registration right the way through to creating their first invoice, and then how to continue to manage their invoices through the supplier portal, because you were not dealing with purely finance or accounts people at a lot of these companies, and small companies actually are the target for or small to medium companies are more of a target for the supplier portal, but they often don't have the resource necessarily or the competencies sometimes in their teams to embrace it. So finding the right way to communicate them, creating invites, so not just the invite from Coupa itself, but I'll often send those suppliers a kind of a more tailored invite to the supplier portal. Also, don't beat yourself up if the people like Microsoft won't use the supplier portal, because people like that, big corporations like that, they just do things their own way. Target the ones you know who are going to be interested. It's same with Google or Facebook. They do things the way they do. Don't waste too much time necessarily. If there is you can see in Coupa if they are using Coupa already with other customers, and you can connect with them quite easily. But pick your battles is what I'm saying. Does that sound fair, Anne? I'm not contradicting anything that you.
Yeah, no, I'd say absolutely. I mean, I think first off is it's all about communication, explaining why you're doing this, that this is now your new way of working, that they are a chosen. I mean, everybody likes to feel important, so they are your chosen supplier, and you wanting to continue to work with them, and this is going to be beneficial to them as well as to you, and the reasons why. So it's that communication process. We find that for some organisations, they have the internal bandwidth to be able to do that onboarding themselves, which absolutely great. And for others, they hand over almost the whole of that process to ourselves, because what you want to do is get that bulk of suppliers onboarded as soon as possible, so you have that great user experience early on. So for some it's a slow, they keep working at it with a small team, trying to bring those suppliers on, which is great. But for others, they'll say, here you go off on board our suppliers, get it done within a short matter of time frame, so that we can get transaction with them on Coupa as soon as possible. So there's different ways, and part of it is the benefits to them, the benefits to you. This is the new way of working now, and also education, hand-holding, showing them how to do it. So whether that's, as you said, video clips, little webinars, whatever way it is, but making it easy for them to get on board.
Yeah, I still do quite a lot of phone calls with not just contributors, but finance accounts people at businesses, helping them with it. But I am a one-man show, so I can't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. A bit of hand-holding. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Again, any last words before we draw that bit to a close? So any hints and tips about how to get suppliers to use the CSP?
No, so the CSP, the Coupa Supplier Portal, absolutely. I mean, I can only agree with Anne and with Jason, is that you need to, not all suppliers will be using or will be logging into the Coupa Supplier Portal, but Coupa does provide with several different options of connecting electronically with suppliers. And one of which is a method called supply actionable notification, which is especially for the long tail of suppliers, small mums and pop shops, right? So they can receive a purchase order into their email inbox and flip that into an invoice. They don't even need to log into Coupa to do that. So there's several different ways of electronically sending the invoice to the customer, and Coupa and it's all about supply enablement. Absolutely agree with Anne, and that's a key element of the implementation as well that shouldn't be missed.
Great, thank you. So we're drawing to a close of the formal part of this presentation. I know there are a lot of questions we didn't get to answer, so good news. A number of our speakers have agreed to stay online for a little bit longer, so we'll have an after party in a minute or so. But before we do, what I'd just like to do is firstly thank our speakers today. So Anne, Hakan and Jason, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights, and for taking questions. I think it's been a really productive hour. I've managed to fill 3 pages of my notebooks on something that I thought I knew a little bit about. So it's been a very useful exercise for me. As I say, we're going to stay online, so it'll be for a while. If you still have an unanswered question, put it into chat. We'll try and get to a few of these in the after party. Other than that, what I would like to do is just recommend that all of you reach out to our friends at Xoomworks and Coupa. I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to talk about any issues or questions you may have, particularly if you don't want to do it in a forum like this. I completely understand that, as do they. I'd like to leave you, though, just with a couple of thoughts. The last few months have tested all of us in our creativity and our ability to do business in difficult times. Warren Buffett once said, you can only tell who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. And the tide went all the way out for several of us. We've seen phenomenal supply chain disruption. We've seen strategic suppliers affected, and we've suddenly had to recognize that we have critical suppliers that perhaps we hadn't thought were so critical pre-COVID-19. Technologies like this can really help your organization. They can help your suppliers, they can help you, and ultimately they help your customers as well. So I would strongly recommend giving it a good look. Take some advice, reach out to those that really know in this subject. But most of all, I'd just like to say thank you to you. Thank you for your attention. It's been a real pleasure. I say so much so that some of us are going to stay on for a little bit longer to answer questions. But what I'm going to do now is just say thank you very much. We're going to turn our cameras off for just a few seconds. We'll still be here, and if you'd like to continue, please do. We'll be back again in a while. But until then, thank you and goodbye. And so we're back. So thank you for that. As I say, this is the after party, the informal part of what we go on. I'm going to continue asking questions that have come through the chat. Sorry, folks, there's been quite a few. So I've had one, another one from Karen. I think we may have covered some of this, but let's go over it again. What are your top 3 tips for preparing business users for the change to Coupa, especially if they are remote sites around the country? Now, Jason, I think you've already said a little bit about using YouTube and calls, but I'm going to go this time to Anne to start. So, Anne, top 3 tips for preparing business users for the change to Coupa, especially if they're in remote sites.
Well, I guess it's making sure they're aware of what it is you're trying to achieve from the introduction of a system like Coupa. And I would say sometimes in organisations, people don't actually know that there is a problem. So for some people, it's educating them as to what the issues are, because if they're not seeing the issues in AP, then they don't understand that there's a team of 25 people dealing with invoices that have got issues with them because of something they've done at the front end of the process. So explaining the issues, explaining where it is you want to get to, what your vision is. And also, I think, sending information on how it will be for them, what the new process will be, how things are going to improve. So it's a lot around communication, I would say. The other thing is, again, back to suppliers and master data, for people to get things organised prior to the implementation, to think about their processes, to think about cleansing their data, and to think about their supplier analysis as well. So those would be my things.
Thank you. Hakan, any thoughts from you? Top tips for getting business users on board?
We've got, we've seen some very innovative ideas from our customer base. Actually, they've recorded videos where, very funny videos to actually promote Coupa across the globe, right? So incorporating every single person within the business. I've seen some Superman procurement people in Superman costumes and Spider-Man costumes, etc. Especially the US folks, they do that really well. So it's all about creativity, right? And I do understand that there are some end users, especially in the current climate, sitting across the globe in their homes. So it's very important to pick those up, to pick them up as well, and to incorporate them and because every single person contributes to these to spend compliance, and it's very important to pick everyone up. And creativity, as I just described, is key.
Thank you. And Jason, I know you've been drawn on a lot today, but anything else? You've gone through this. How would you prepare business users for the changeover to Coupa, particularly if they're in remote offices? I think you're on mute, Jason.
My apologies. Sorry, schoolboy error. Yeah, so it's really important to identify the different types of users that you're going to have. So we have kind of people who place orders in our print centres and who are buying things in a kind of a very standard. Here's your, 2 rolls of paper for a print press type orders. Then we have our editors who are commissioning editorial for the papers and the websites, and their requisitions and their purchase orders look different, and they need to also they don't need to know how to order stationery, for example, using the punch out, because somebody else is doing that. So targeted training. I also used, there are other applications, but we've used Teams to run training out into, from the very start. In 2018, we ran all of our training through Teams, not just as meetings, but using, I think it's called like a town hall type training, so you don't get constant interruptions. It's kind of similar to this, but not as professional as this application. And that's a kind of, targeting, doing mass training in that way, and then targeted training to different areas of the business was really important. And I continue to repeat. I've just run 3 sessions in September as repeat training for our editors, because like a lot of businesses, we've had a bit of change in terms of structure, so needed to get people back on board.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to have a go at answering this as well, because this is an area of endeavour I've spent a lot of time on, in how to make change or transformation stick. So many businesses are very good at setting a vision. We have that guiding star, and they come up with strategies around that vision. I don't think there's much that we can teach them there. The mistake that many, though, make is that once they come across a good idea, they immediately go to planning and giving people actions and lots of responsibility. And they've actually missed a step. So the step that many businesses miss is the one that all 3 of our speakers have talked about or alluded to, which is engaging and exciting the people that have to make the change. Now, that is not just a logical answer issue. You actually need to engage them emotionally to do that. They have to want it. So that engagement and excitement is all about showing them the value to them. Now, it might be indirect. You might say, well, it's good for you because it's great for customers or our suppliers, but nonetheless, take that moment to emotionally engage. The other thing I would say is that many organizations have adopted a kind of sprint mentality. So we're going to run a project for 90 days, and when we're done, wipe our brow and say, thank goodness that's all over, and everybody goes back to the way it used to be. So I would also say that when you reach the end of a phase, take the time to bed it in, sustain the momentum, continue to show the benefits. So be loud and proud about what you've actually been able to achieve. So that would have been my contribution, is actually spend a bit of time to emotionally engage with business users as well. We're all people, we're not just lines on a spreadsheet. So next question then. I think this is a very quick one. I'm going to go to Hakan about this. What does prescription mean? I know what it means from a modelling point of view, but Jason, you mentioned getting prescriptive recommendations out of Coupa. Hakan, your definition.
Absolutely. It's like a doctor prescribing what's good for you, right? Not just saying, you go to a doctor, you say, I've got a headache, and they prescribe you a piece of medicine. It's actually understanding what's wrong with you, right? And doing the checkups and then understanding what's actually behind that headache. And Coupa does a similar thing, right? So through community intelligence, we are able to, especially when it comes to KPIs and the success metrics that I've talked about in early on, we can, the system itself, the Coupa technology, the AI can prescribe certain actions to the users to do, so they can improve the KPIs from levels of, let's say, increase your pre-approved spending from levels of 80% to 90% by doing X, Y, and Z, right? So, and that's usually the power that comes from the power of the community and from suggestions that Coupa within the insights segment actually prescribes you to do to achieve better, more value and better results from a KPI perspective.
Lovely, thank you very much. That's exactly what I was thinking. That prescription, when faced with a given set of circumstances, what's the best possible route or course of action? So the next question comes from Laszlo. Laszlo has asked one. I think we've answered most of it, but the last bit I'm going to come back to Jason again. So what you found as best practice to support the change in your organization, I think we've talked about that quite a lot. What you did, how did you approach the different impacted user groups with training, and what would you do differently? So I'm going to come back to you again, Jason, very briefly on this. Let's focus on the training for a moment. So knowing now what you would have liked to have known then, what might you do differently about training?
More of it, I suppose. It's the obvious one, but resources always limited. We did some pretty targeted training, as I've mentioned, but I think it's unfortunately some things only come out in the wash, if you like, the gaps in your training. So don't be afraid to adapt training as it goes along. So I have re-recorded those I've created videos of training that I've run for editors, for example, and I've re-recorded them. So the ones that I did in 2018, I was not the expert on Coupa that I am now, and I have far more tools up my sleeve to give those editors in my new training than I did previously, and I don't give them things that are they will view as a waste of time, not important to them. Likewise with the videos that I've done for our suppliers on YouTube, I've changed those and re-recorded them because there are updates anyway to Coupa, to the supplier portal. It's seen a couple of updates over the year and a half, and I want to make sure that when they log into it, what I'm talking about looks like what they're seeing. And that's the same with our internal people as well. The front end of Coupa changed very slightly, but it would have been confusing if I hadn't realized that and just kept giving them the same training link to watch over and over again. So you just keep up to speed, make sure you don't keep firing out inaccurate training material. That would be good tip.
Great, thank you. Anne, anything you would like to add about training?
I think obviously when we do an implementation, we design a training package depending on what the client wants. It's normally a train the trainer approach that we do at that stage. However, some customers do want more in-depth training, and we've done training for organisations ongoing, and done as Jason said, we've done our own some videos, and what we found on that is what works really well is very short, bite-size training, because people, I think it's the way we all are now, you don't want to sit down for too long and do a long session. So when we do those sort of clips, we try and keep it short and sweet. So yeah, and absolutely, as we all know, Coupa is an evolving system. There's 3 upgrades a year. They're always bringing on new functionality, and you're paying for this great system. You want to make sure that your end users know of new functionality and have the top tips to use it in the optimal way. So yeah, so it isn't something you can just do and think, I've done that now, that's the end of it. And of course, like all of us, people come and go, so you've got new staff that need training too. So yeah, it's important to keep on that.
Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing is start early, do more, but in bite-sized pieces, and keep it current. And I think is perhaps how we could summarize that. Now, I'm going to come to you with the next question. This question is from Stuart. What about the use of free-form requisitions for appointing subcontractors rather than catalogues and punch-outs? So any thoughts about the use of free-form requisitions?
Absolutely, that's another option in Coupa as well. So there's 3 ways: catalogs, punch-outs, as you just said, web forms, and also free text forms. However, we'd like to limit the use of free text forms as it is not part of structured spend. So it's, I guess, Jason can talk to that as well, because you want to ensure that you have some sort of structured spend that you can slice and dice, and from a reporting perspective as well, makes life easier. So if everyone was to fill out a free text form to say I need X, Y, or Z, it'd be the life of a procurement manager would be more challenging, I guess, right? So, Jason, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. In some of the things that you buy are not regular purchases, but there's an option. I'm not sure when this came on with Coupa, but when you create a requisition, or when you look at a purchase order, they're now against the item description, there's a little plus symbol next to it now, where you can click that plus symbol, and please correct me how kind of I'm wrong when I'm describing this, but you click the plus symbol, and you can create a catalogue item from that particular requisition. So you can somebody like myself or any one of our users, you can see things that, oh, hang on a minute, that's a regular purchase. You can create a catalogue item, and then people can go to the catalogue and find that item in the future. And it's a kind of you're growing a catalogue organically, as it were, from doing that. And you're taking what was an unstructured spend that you identified it. Actually, it's something that we're going to be buying regularly, and I want people to keep buying that and nothing else. I don't want them going off piste and buying it from somebody else. So
again, I think the question was related to subcontractors, right? Which is services related spend. So again, web forms do really help in that regard as well. And Coupa has also an additional solution on that called Services Maestro that helps you, that kind of gives you extra functionality in terms of timesheets and so on and so forth, and requisitions when it comes to complex services related spend as well. So we were, as I said, we've got a comprehensive suite of solutions. And I believe, Jason, you're not using the services or the...
No, it's not something I'm familiar with particularly. Yeah.
Great, thank you both. So I think we're down to 2 questions now. So Matthew would like to know, now this could be a technical one and a procedural one. So I'm going to look at everybody for this. How do you manage the HR organizational structure for the approval process? So I guess there's a way of how do you do it in Coupa and how do you do it in Newsquest? So let's go to Jason first. So how do you do it? How do you manage the org structure for approvals?
So that's something I could have mentioned earlier, actually. Sorry, but yeah, part of your setup, your pre-implementation is you need to get a grip on that. You need to. So we had an approval structure, an organization structure that was kind of lots of different approval thresholds. People, in one side of the business, at one level of the business, seem to have a bigger approval limit than, say, a director over in the other side of the business. That we basically went back to the drawing board. We created a far more simplistic approval structure in terms of the levels, and then we overlaid the particular roles within the business that needed that. And yes, there has been a little bit of flex that's happened as since then, but it's basically stayed roughly the same, and it works. And so we actually have we looked at what was historically what was the spend, the average spend of, say, a regional director that they were approving, and actually they weren't approving that many spend purchases over 35k. So we limited their approval threshold at 35k, and anything above that became the ultimate approver, which for us is our CFO and our CEO. And that meant that the top dogs don't get bothered too much with small spend. They thought they might have done, but when we showed them the evidence of what we were spending and how often they actually should be involved, this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. We need to give control back to the business, but at the right levels. So that's what we did, and it works. if you look at it in Coupa, there's a very complicated chart that it generates, which is quite an amazing thing to look at. It's kind of somebody Hakan maybe will share an example of that at some point. But it's amazing what it does, actually, how it controls it. It sounds it's a simple structure, but what it does in the background is quite special. So.
Absolutely. And just to add there, you can also get an integration into your HR system built that enables you to basically pull your HR org chart from that system, from your HCM system into Coupa. So, but there's two options. One, maintain it in Coupa. Secondly, get Coupa integrated into your human capital management system and get the org chart from there.
Great. And we're coming to our last question. So this one, I think I'm going to go to Jason one last time. And then if Hakan or Anne, you'd like to add to that, I'd welcome it. So how was the payback on the investment measured? It's the ROI question. How did you calculate a return on your investment?
Well, that's hard for me to quantify at the moment because our business has changed so much. But in real terms, we knew, first of all, I knew how much it was going to cost us versus what we were actually paying previously. But I can see within Coupa, I can pull off all sorts of reports that show me, first of all, what my target. I've got one. I'm not going to share it now because I don't want to share privileged information. But I can see what my suppliers with 80% of spend are, for example, and I can target how many of those and see how many of those are using purchase orders, for example, how many of those invoices are going through unbacked, and how many are backed by a purchase order. And for us, one of our ROIs was around we reduced some headcount during the course of the project. And we've been able to maintain that reduced headcount. We haven't had to go back and start recruiting more staff because it hasn't worked. So I know that particular ROI is being achieved as a saving, and I can continue to monitor the ever improving situation in terms of backed and unbacked invoices against purchase orders.
Thank you, Jason. Anne, anything you would recommend about measuring ROI?
Yeah, I think Jason's point there in terms of the visibility, really, which is really linking back to the start of our call around people's issues. So before Coupa, a lot of the organisations that we have worked with have no visibility, are making decisions really on the fly without the data. And as we all know, it's that information that we need to make sure that we are informed, making decisions for the business that are going to save costs. Possibly reduce headcount, but it's not all about that. It's now in the world that we're in, it's about being able to make sure that we are using the right suppliers, that they are sustainable, that the risk level is right for us. If we're global, we need to understand how our suppliers are acting in this current environment that we're in. So there's so many things that we need to factor in procurement. It's a completely different game to it was when I started out in sales in procurement many years ago, because it touches so many different facets. So yeah, we've got the information. Jason's got the information at his fingertips, and any organisation now using Coupa will have it. What they choose to do with that information, obviously, is another matter. But without it, you're not going to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Anne. Hakan, the last word goes to you.
Oh, really? Okay. So in terms of ROI, surely there is we have over 1,500 customers across the globe, and I think all of them have some sort of different ways of measuring ROI. I can give you two examples, one of which is Aon Insurance, and it's from their earnings call as well, where the CFO actually was part of their earnings call and said that Coupa helped them to actually save $30 million of spend per annum. So it could be cost savings like this, or Rolls-Royce again at an open market day. They said they managed to reduce their they spent billions of dollars or billions of pounds through Coupa, and they managed to cut their spend by hundreds of millions. And it's just these. That's to do with cost savings, but then again, there are certain KPIs that have nothing to do with cost savings. They're more on the process efficiency side of things. So it all comes down. Very early on in the sales cycle at Coupa, we would define business goals and objectives and KPIs that would then not just be captured for the sales cycle, but it would then be transferred to the implementation. So together with Xoomworks, we would then make sure that the system is implemented in a way that delivers these results and the KPIs and the success metrics that we together with the customer identified. And then Coupa's technology will enable the customer to keep track of that. And also our value, our customer value management team will ensure on a quarterly basis at least we get together and discuss. So how are we doing on the KPIs? Are we achieving our KPIs? If we've achieved certain KPIs, let's set ourselves new targets. And it's always a never-ending story, right? You always want to get better and better. And it's that's all I wanted to say about this topic.
And thank you very much. And so now it really is the end. I want to thank again our three speakers, Anne, Hakan and Jason. Thank them for being very generous with their time and staying on over the allotted hour. Thank you to the audience for the questions, more obviously than we'd hoped, but it's great to have them there. And I would once again recommend, if you would like to find out more, if you have other questions that you didn't feel were answered adequately today or that you didn't feel comfortable asking, please reach out to our friends at Xoomworks and Coupa. Other than that, it really is goodbye until the next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.